Hello everyone, happy Friday. Welcome back to a new video. Or if you're new here, welcome. I'm glad you decided to click on this video. My name is Bettina. I am mostly a watercolor artist with Doodles and I upload every Friday. So if today's video has sparked your interest, there is lots more on my channel that you can go and watch and get inspired from. And if you like what you see, I would love it if you stick around a little bit longer and even consider subscribing. So today I am once again playing around with the Neocolor II from Caran D'Ache. I got this set for Christmas and ever since I have been playing around with them, mostly in my sketchbook, and I have a couple of videos of that on my channel if you want to go check it out as well. But today I wanted to see how they work on watercolor paper. This is the 140-pound Hahnemühle cold press watercolor paper that I'm using, and I cut it down to a smaller size because I'm still playing around with them and getting used to them and what they can do. I don't want to waste paper. So I'll be mainly talking about the application and what I found, and then I also want to dive in a little bit more into the white pens that I currently have available to myself, because I wanted to mainly doodle with white pens, and as most of us know, white pens that work really well are really hard to find. Now, was I successful today? You will see in this video. But first, let's concentrate on how I apply these colors and how I move them on the paper. There are lots of different ways how you can go about applying the color. You will see a couple of different ways in this video, but do whatever feels right for your application. I am also using a water brush today, and you might think to yourself, why is she dipping the bristles into water if there is water in the reservoir? I tried, guys. I tried doing it without it, and I got nowhere. Unfortunately, this specific brush, I can't squeeze the reservoir to get more water out, and whatever was coming out just wasn't enough. So that's why you see me periodically dipping into my water that I have on the side. I do like working with the water brush a little bit more, I found, because it does give me just the right amount of water as I am moving the colors around. The initial application, yes, I need a little bit more, especially like if you can see it here, I have quite a bit of pigment on the paper, but for that, I just need a little bit more water on my brush. But for smaller areas, and if I want to clean up certain areas a little bit more, I thought that this water brush was really, really awesome to use. I did use other brushes, you will see me here as well, but that is only when I was afraid that there was going to be too much water coming out of my brush, and so I switched to a different one every now and then. But for the most part, I really enjoyed working with this water brush. As always, I don't really have an idea when I start out with these paintings. I just put a line down and then I go from there. I did know that I wanted them to be loose and flowy, and I think I was able to achieve that. And as I was filling the page, I started to see where it was going, and then it was just a matter of filling it in a little bit more and cleaning up certain areas, maybe intensifying the colors a little bit more. What I love about these Caran D'Ache Neocolor II is they don't necessarily stay on the paper. I know that's weird to say, and you do have to be a little bit more careful as you are putting more layers on top of already existing layers. What you don't see is that I took my hairdryer to it to speed up the drying process, just because I was in the flow and I didn't want to interrupt that flow by waiting. So most of those layers are basically dried before I apply more. But then as I was going back in with more color or a different color, I was able to really mix them on the paper immediately, and I really find that very satisfying. I also was able to move some of the pigment to where I wanted it to be a little bit more intensified, and I don't think I can do that with regular watercolors. At least I have not found that that's possible, and I can definitely do that with these Neocolors. To give it a little bit more interest and depth, I went in with my Caran D'Ache colored pencils, and I really like how that turned out. Then next up were the white pens, and I brought out all of my white pens that I have available to me, and I decided to play around with it a little bit. The last couple of times I used them, I noticed that they kind of disappeared in the paint, and I wasn't sure if it was because it wasn't watercolor paper. I just felt like I needed to play around with them a little bit more, and they gave me a run for my money. And even at the end, I still didn't feel like they were intense enough. I went over those lines, every single line, double if not 3 times, with the markers, with the Posca pens, and I still felt like they were slowly fading into the paper. I have 3 different thicknesses of the Posca pen, and I noticed that I kept going back to them instead of using the Signo or the Jelly Roll pens. Those other 2 pens just kept skipping over the page a little bit too much for me, which I found very frustrating. Of course, this is watercolor paper and it does have some tooth to it, so I feel like the skipping was because of the rougher texture of the paper, but I've had difficulties with those pens before, so I gave them the benefit of the doubt. But in the end, I kept going back to the Posca pens. I do have a different Signo white pen, which is supposed to be a lot better than the ones that I have used in the past. And I don't know if they're getting older and they're just a little bit more dried out. They worked really well in the beginning when I got them, but nowadays I feel that they're not performing as well as they used to. I also used a few new doodles in this piece that I definitely want to revisit again in a different piece. I feel like they just didn't shine as much in this one because of my struggles with the white pens. It took me a little while to figure out what I wanted to doodle, and I resorted back to taking a picture of the background and then importing it into Procreate and just play around with a few doodles there before I started on the paper itself. If you feel really precious about a background and you're afraid of screwing up by doodling stuff over it, I highly suggest that you make a copy of your work beforehand, or even 2 or 3 copies, and you just try a few things out on that first. If you don't have Procreate or a tablet, then this is a great alternative. You can see here I'm trying the Jelly Roll pen. I have 3 different thicknesses and the number 10 seemed to be the best, but it was really skipping. And then this one is the Signo one, and that too wasn't performing as I would have hoped. I really wanted to leave this footage in because I feel that it helps a lot of you in deciding what kind of white pens to go for. Of course, that is not to say that they don't work on other paper or other backgrounds, so it might be beneficial for you to invest in a couple and see how they work. And I, in the meantime, will try and do my best and show you how I use them and how they work on the papers that I have. It really does help to have different size nibs of the Posca pens or any other pen that you have that you want to work with, because not every nib size works for every doodle, and it might not be exactly visible which pens I am using, but I switch throughout the process to different size nibs all the time. For example, I always switch to the thicker nib when I want to fill in a certain space. And then for the lines, I tend to use the thinner ones that are available to me. I really struggled to see the pen lines on those lighter areas, and I had to go over those lines multiple times, and still I didn't feel like I could actually see them. Now that I see the footage back on my computer screen, I can see them a lot better actually than I did in real life. Of course, there might be times where a faint outline works really well for what you're needing it or for what you're working on. So to have the option of going over it multiple times without disturbing the first layer is also kind of helpful to know. I had over 2 hours worth of footage for this piece, and forgive me for speeding up most of it. I didn't know how else to include most of what I did because everything just looked so beautiful. I just didn't want to cut more out than was absolutely necessary, and still I had to condense it down quite a bit. I hope you still get a lot from this video. I know a lot of you don't like the sped up process, and I really apologize, but nobody wants to sit through a 2-hour plus video. I also had to cut out some of the areas that you just couldn't see what I was doing because the white pen wasn't showing up until I went over it a couple of times. Then I remembered I had this Copic opaque white little jar, and I hadn't used it in a while, and I had to shake it up really well, and it comes with this applicator, and so I decided to try it, and that in the end worked best, I have to say. However, I am glad I used the white pens first, because even though this Copic white makes a big difference, I was afraid that I wasn't able to cover everything, and even if I didn't cover everything, there is still some white underneath that will mask that a little bit better. Also, it's really hard to go in circles, so I stayed away from those and just stuck to the straight lines and the lines that were a little bit easier to cover. But look at the difference this makes as I am going over those skippy lines with the Copic white. So you're asking yourself, why did I use the white if it bothered me so much? I like that white on those colorful backgrounds. I find it a lot more feminine and not so harsh than the black markers. I do want to try something like this with black markers as well, but I just like the white recently, and so because I am trying out new things and I am getting used to not only the Neocolors but also a new style, I am in my experimental phase and I wanted to work with the white. But of course, black is definitely an option as well. The Copic white gave the lines a little bit more texture, and I really liked that, and so I decided to bring out my dotting tool and the white acrylic paint and just go over all the dots with that as well. I finished the piece by deciding to go over the very light colors again with my Neocolors by applying it with a fine liner brush straight from the crayon, and that also helped intensify especially those lighter colors a little bit more. And with that, we will conclude today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching the process and seeing me use the Neocolor IIs and also those pesky white pens. Stay creative wherever you are in the world, and I will see you next week with a new video.